done. So the technology is there. If you've used GoToMeetings or GoToWebinars before, you'll be used to this, but there's an opportunity for you to type in some questions so we can see them on the way through. So please raise your virtual hand if you wish to, or type in a question and we'll deal with it on the way through. So our aim today, this is our aim today, is to show you how to communicate clearly with others even when you're really busy. And it's interesting to think how managers' behaviours sometimes change when they're busy. When we're rushed and when we're stressed, sometimes we cut corners, and if we're not too careful, we cut some of the important corners in communication, and we end up not making our message as clear as it possibly could be. So to structure the day, I just want to talk about a little bit about the need, and then I'll just put together top 10 tips, really, 10 tips in order to communicate, be that on a one-to-one with a quick chat, through to maybe a short presentation to a team, or maybe a big presentation to lots of people. And then we'd finish off with so what, as to what are we going to do differently as a result of this morning. I reckon it's about 45 minutes, and then time for questions and chat near the end. So let's talk about the need. First of all, I think there is a human need for communication. Put two people in the room, in the end they'll end up talking to each other. And on a varying scale, people need to talk and they need to communicate and they need to chat, and there is a human need. But I think there's also a business need. When we recruit people, we almost assume that they will have good communication skills, that they'll be able to convey a message, they'd be able to engage other people, that they'd be able to make sure that the message is transmitted clearly. And there is that expectation. When you become a manager, there's an expectation you'll be able to communicate and present to your team. When you become a department head, there's an expectation that you'll be able to present to large groups. And you become a senior manager or director, and there's an expectation that you'll be able to present to a room full of stakeholders and to communicate clearly. And there's a wonderful book called And Death Came Third. And this was based on some research by the New York Times. New York Times did some research as to what people fear most. And death came third. Number one was public speaking. So there are people that would rather die than speak in public, die than communicate. And I'm quite impressed by the two writers, Andy Lopather and Peter Roper, because on this research they wrote their first book, which is all about public speaking, and they squeezed all the value from that, and now they produced the second edition, which looks at the second one on the list, which was the fear of walking into a room full of strangers. So their second edition, which is available now, is all about networking as well. And for those of you that do business networking or networking of any kind, I would recommend that book. Great for networking, great for public speaking. But I think it just shows that research would show that some people would rather die than speak in public. So we thought we might do a poll here, Alyson, about what communication challenges people may face. Is it one-to-one, small team, large group, or all of the above?
There we go. Is that the right one? Yep. Okay, so if you could all just click the buttons, that would be great. It needs people to do that. That's so true, Ian. I mean, obviously you and I love the sound of our own voices, so I find it very hard to understand, but being such an extrovert, but you're right, that human need. I mean, when two people are in a room, there's a sort of social expectation as well, isn't there, of people talking, or
Yeah.
in my case, me talking at somebody has been known.
Yeah, it is, and now you and I are at the extrovert end of the scale, but I think it's really important that we do understand people who are at the introvert end of the scale. There's a wonderful TED talk by Susan Cain called The Power of Introverts, and I always recommend people spend 20 minutes just looking at that TED talk, because it helps introverts understand how they need to work in an extrovert world, and it helps extroverts understand how introverts tick. So TED talk by Susan Cain.
Could you
about 11 minutes?
Yeah, could we get that? Could you get that link to me, and then we'll email it to everybody after thing. That's really good. We are waiting. There's one person who's not voted yet. So if we could just make sure that try and get that last person to vote. And then I'm going to share that. So has everybody clicked a choice there?
Good one.
There you go, Ian. Can you see the answers?
Yes, I can. But there we go. So that's interesting to see that, you know, for 25% of people on the call, it's one-to-one, which is the challenge. And what I'm going to cover this morning is useful when we're presenting to small teams and large groups, but it's also really handy just to gather your thoughts in a structured way before a one-to-one discussion. So although I often use some of the stuff I'm covering this morning when I'm helping people to present to a team meeting or to a company event, I think it's also very valid for, okay, I need a difficult conversation with a member of the team, so how am I going to structure the conversation? It doesn't mean that it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation with notes taken. It just means, oh, what do I have to say at the front end to get things in the right place? How am I going to set the tone correctly? Thank you for doing that. Let's have a look at the top 10 tips. So here they are, number one. Number one for me is about preparation. And the first thing that's possible is to grab as much time as you can. So if my boss has said to me, Ian, can you present to this week's team meeting about that project you're working on? My answer could be, well, I could, but I could do a much better job at next week's team meeting. Somebody asked me to do this, can you do this next week? Well, if I do it the week after, I could have a much better presentation. So grab as much preparation time as you can. We do need to think about the audience. We need to think about, okay, is this one person? Is this the team, or is this more? And the last webinar I did in December, we were talking about using a process called same and different, just thinking about, so what's same about the person, what's different? Just thinking about the audience, how technical are they, what sort of language can I use? I need to gather information about the subject. Invariably, we're talking about our specialist subject, something that we know quite a bit about. Sometimes we've got far too much material rather than not enough, and we have to make good decisions about what we leave out rather than what we pull in. We need to think about the language that we use, and we'll talk about language a bit later on. And then the medium, what's best? Do we do it face-to-face, do it by email, or do it by webinar? And choosing the right medium and using the medium well, I think, is really important when we're communicating as busy people. A good colleague of mine that I trained with recently was training with somebody else, and the other person said to her, oh, you're much nicer than I expected you to be, which was an interesting piece of feedback. He said, so what do you mean? She said, well, it's just all your emails are very short and curt. And
you're talking about me, Ian.
No, not at all. Well, it wasn't you. But the feedback she got was that her emails were very short and curt.
Yeah.
And people thought, you must be a curt sort of person. And when they met them, they said, oh, you're far nicer than you are in your email.
I have genuinely had that feedback, so I think you might be being polite by saying it was somebody else.
No, not at all, actually. It is somebody else. And the fact is that she does her emails on the train, you know, and does it on her mobile in the train. Someone sends a nice chatty email. She's likely to reply saying yes, or no, or okay, because she's doing her emails on the train on the way home. And so it's interesting to choose the medium and use the medium well in order to communicate in the way that we want to. So number one is preparation. Number two is about getting off to a great start. I think it's really important that we do get off to a great start of any communication. And what helps me is ABCD, really easy to remember. And if I'm going to communicate face-to-face with somebody or give a short presentation to a group of people, I need to get off to a great start. And I use ABCD. First of all, I need to grab their attention. Never assume you've got people's attention. before you talk. You need to grab that attention. If I'm having a one-to-one discussion with somebody, in the first sentence, I might need to tell them what the discussion's about. If it's going to be a difficult conversation, I probably don't need to talk about the weather or anything else. That's social chit-chat. I need to get straight to the point. I need to grab their attention. The B is about stating the benefit in their terms, what's in it for them. I need to talk to you about this project so you can make sure that we deliver it on time. The C is about credibility, securing your credibility, maybe in one sentence that actually explains why you're talking about this and what you know about it. And D is direction, telling people what's in store. So if I'm doing a presentation, I'm always thinking about A, B, C, D at the front. But if I'm having a one-to-one chat, I think about the same thing.
Ian, I think
what's going to be...
And that's great, especially those of you who are in HR or have to have conversations with people around redundancy, as an example. That would really help me focus my mind on how to have that conversation. You're absolutely right. There's the chit chat in a redundancy conversation does not need to happen. You just need to, I mean, you'll definitely have their attention, but that's a really great methodology for that. Back to you.
Love it, yeah. So yeah, A, B, C, D, it just helps me. They're almost like a checklist to start off. The direction's important. People like to know what's in store. So I may say, well, can we just have a quick chat about this new process we're introducing, its impact upon the HR team, and how we're going to make sure we change our ways of working in order to get the best from the new process. So setting the context and talking about the direction of the conversation at the very beginning is really important. If you are giving a presentation, I also add QHD, which is questions, handouts and time, because if I am giving a short presentation, people need to know what the rules are about questions. Can they ask them on the way through, or do they have to hold them to the end? You may have been to a presentation when you've taken loads and loads of notes, and at the end you get a handout and you think, well, had I known, I wouldn't have taken all these notes. So we need to say something about handouts. And then I think time referencing, I think we call it, people just need to know how long a presentation or even a chat's going to take. But I always use the word approximately. If I say this is going to be a 20-minute presentation, if I don't make it exactly 20 minutes, people think I've overrun. But if I say it's about 20 minutes or approximately 20 minutes, I get a little bit of leeway as to how long the conversation is. And even on a one-to-one chat with somebody, I'll say, can we have a chat about this new project? It will take about 10 minutes. Just so from the very outset, people know how long the conversation is likely to be. We're busy people. We're communicating to busy people. I think it's only right to tell people how long you think the discussion is likely to take. So that's number 2, getting off to a great start. Number 3 is giving it some structure. People like structure. It's nice to have a magical mystery tour occasionally, but they like to know where they're going, and they like a bit of structure. They need a beginning, a middle, and an end to a conversation or a presentation. So the classic one is to do it chronologically. Think about the history, think about the current day and maybe the future. So this is the history of PVHR, this is what we're doing on the current day, and this is the bright future going forward. You may want to talk about features of a product, its advantages and its benefits. And if you go to the PVHR websites, and I recommend that you do, you'll see that we've just talked about our services, we've talked about our clients and our people. 3 things to talk about. And 3 is the magic number. If you're going to give a conversation or a presentation structure, see if you can structure it in 3. If you do 5 different things, by the time you're on number 5, people have forgotten number 1. So 3 is the magic number. Think if you can divide what you want to communicate into 3 separate bits.
Ian?
Number 4 is once we've got... Yes, ma'am.
Before we go further, I was just wondering if we could think about some of the situations that people have got. They could go to their questions box, or we can maybe unmute people. I think you should all be able to raise your hand. There's a little button where you can raise your hand. And if you would like to chat, and we've tested your mic and it works, if you could just raise your hand for me, then I could unmic you. It'd be interesting to know what. So if you go back a slide or 2.
Yeah, of course.
that one, you know, A, B, C, D. I mentioned a redundancy conversation would be really good. I wonder if people could think about different scenarios that they have in their world of work when that sort of structure would work. So if you could go to the questions box or raise your hand, if everyone could do that.
So I guess it's what difficult conversations that you might have to do, or when do you need to communicate, and it's important to get off to a great start, and maybe important to give it some structure as well, just to make it real for you. I can think of some examples, but let's think about how real things that you have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, so we've got people who said things like team meetings, making them more effective in terms of time, and the bit that you said about the time scale, because team meetings can tend to definitely to drift on and on and on. They talked about having to give somebody some performance feedback. So those are a couple of ideas that have come in.
Yeah. Especially with team meetings, because I think we get into the routine. You know, we have it on the first Monday of every month, and if we're not careful, we do it because it is the first Monday of the month, rather than doing it because there's a need. And so, getting off to a great start, maybe just reminding people of why we do it and how important it is, and how it enables people to support and help each other through their busy work, by letting us know what the challenges are that each of us have in the team.
Yeah.
Just reminding people why we do it.
Okay, brilliant.
So, superb. So giving it some structure, really important. You know, think about how you're going to structure that conversation. There are classic ways of doing it, but just try and think of what's most appropriate for the message I'm putting across. And then we get to this bit about prioritizing our content. So we need to gather all our material together. And what I need to do is think about, okay, given the time that I've got, what things must I cover? What are the essential things that must be covered in this conversation or presentation? What are the things that I should cover if I've got time? And what's the icing on the cake? The things that I could cover, not very important, but I could cover them if I've got time. So I just need to, having gathered my content material together, to think about what's the must cover, what's the should cover, and what's the could cover. Now, there's different ways of preparing, different ways of sorting things out, and some people would write it down in note form. Some people might transfer it to small cards, and I see lots of people, when they're giving small presentations or brief presentations, writing some cards, which is great because it just keeps that information. Some people might draw up a mind map. That work by Tony Buzan about drawing up mind maps that a lot of people I see using. And then I'm just about to talk to you about a horizontal plan, which is another way of doing it. But maybe there's an opportunity just to do a poll, Alyson, about what is people's preferred method of preparing and writing down and preparing for a conversation or a presentation.
I realised I was on mute. Maybe could you just tell us a little bit more about the horizontal plan so people know what they're voting on there?
Yeah, I'm just about to tell you about it. I was just wondering whether people had heard of it. I'm just about to go through what a horizontal plan is, but I do see quite a few mind maps as I'm training and coaching and working around. So I think mind maps, some people love them and it really works well for them. Other people do use those brief notes with bullet points, and it would seem from the poll that lots of people are doing that.
Are we waiting just one more person? I think there should be one more person just needs to vote. There's the results. And I'm sure we use notes with bullet points because frankly it's the fastest thing, isn't it? I mean, if you start doing writing it out word for word, well, although that does have its merits sometimes. If you're really maybe new in a job, that might be your preferred method to make sure you've got everything right. And again, just coming from our HR angle, I know that some of our clients would ask Sian to write down, again, let's say it's a performance review or something that could potentially be contentious, then we would write out quite comprehensive notes in advance of that. That's not necessarily about being in a busy environment, but certainly making sure that we get it right. Mind maps are good. For me personally, mind maps are more for projects and for something bigger. But I think the point you're probably trying to get across is actually if we could put a bit more effort up front into our communication, then maybe we would be more efficient, because let's say we just write our bullet points quickly, have the chat, you know, we may well have missed something. And if you do a mind map, that is a way of sort of making your brain work and, you know, a little bit harder and thinking about those further reaching things that you need to get across to that individual.
Yeah, and some of the team from PVHR have been helping a government department with one of their messages that they need to push out to tens of thousands of people, and we're helping them in order to have a core brief which that needs to be communicated, but also to add some personalisation to it, so people can add their own experience to exactly what that is.
Yeah.
So I've put up what is the horizontal plan. This is the horizontal plan that I was talking about. I've used this for years, and if I'm giving a short presentation, I use this, but also I use it to gather my thoughts if I'm having a face-to-face conversation. Predominantly I use it if I'm having to present, you know, a presentation to a group of people, do a sales pitch, or make a presentation to people about a certain subject. But I also use it to gather my thoughts if I need to have a conversation. And I call it the horizontal plan because it's, you know, in landscape and therefore horizontal across the page. And it's just a way on a single sheet of paper in order to gather my thoughts, such that in the columns across from the left-hand side, first of all, I'm just thinking about that ABCD: attention, benefits, credibility, direction. How am I going to grab attention? What are the benefits to the audience stated in their terms? How am I going to secure my credibility so they can understand why I'm stood up and they're sat down, or why I'm speaking on this subject? And then giving them a little insight as to, well, these are the topics we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the history, the current day, the future, whatever it may be. And then I may just have a reminder there to say something about questions, handouts, and time. So that first column on the left-hand side is really making sure I get off to a great start. And then by plotting on this horizontal plan, topic A, topic B, topic C, and putting them in order, the musts first at the top, these are the things I must cover, followed by the things that I could cover, followed the things that I should cover, followed by the things that I could cover. If I put them in that priority order, it enables me to make sure that, given a restricted time, the important things are definitely covered. And then the summary on the right-hand side we'll talk about in a moment, but it's just about making sure that we have that last say, and we repeat that one last thing at the end so that they can take away our key message. If I've got a mind map, it's very difficult for me to reduce and distill a mind map down. And sometimes I've prepared for a 30-minute presentation, and then because things have overrun or times have changed, I'm asked, you know, that 30-minute presentation, can you do it in 20 minutes? And yeah, the answer is yes, I can. And if I've got a mind map, sometimes it's quite difficult to decide what comes away and what I leave behind. But if I've got a horizontal plan, all I do is draw a line across it and leave the could behind. So if I've got a 30-minute presentation on that single sheet of A4, if I'm asked to do 20 minutes, I just leave the coulds behind and just cover the musts and the shoulds, and that way I can scale the presentation or the conversation to meet the time that's there, especially if I'm busy or the other person's really busy. Single sheet A4, bullet points, structured, off to a great start, lots of structure in the middle, and a great summary at the end.
Nice.
So And the other thing, just a practical thing, is that sometimes if you're presenting and you're nervous, if you stand there with a single sheet of paper, classic photocopy 80-gram paper, your hand doesn't need to shake much for it to sound like there's thunder outside, because your hand is shaking a lot. Especially if you've got a clip mic on, you know, and you've got a shaking bit of paper in your hand, then your nerves are making it rattle away. So whenever I get to the end of one of those striped paper pads, I always stop 3 pages from the end. So whenever I draw up my horizontal plan, I always draw it up on a bit of paper that's attached to that bit of cardboard at the back of the paper pad. So when you get to the end of the pad, don't go all the way into to the end in the cardboard. Stop about 2 or 3 pages short and keep those somewhere safe, such that when you need to draw up your horizontal plan, you can do it on something that's attached to a piece of cardboard. Hold that in your hand. Doesn't matter how much your hand shakes, no one will think there's thunder outside. So number 6 I put down about using visual language. I think it's really important that we draw helpful analogies and we think about, oh, that's interesting, so what stories can I tell? What analogies can I use? And to give it a lot of thought. Because I know that when I've been chatting to people or having a conversation, sometimes I've thought, oh, that's a useful analogy, and I start saying, well, it's a bit like this, and I get halfway through the analogy and I think, do you know, it's nothing like this. Or some of it is like this, but not all of it is like this. And so I think analogies work really well, but we do need to choose them quite carefully. And so maybe in part of our preparation, we want to use visual language. People like visual language. They like us to paint a rich picture of, you know, this is the way it's going to be. It enables us to do that. So maybe rather than grabbing analogies at the time, try to think, oh, that's interesting. Can I think of an analogy? I was working yesterday running a training course and we were talking about change. And an analogy or a picture I often use is I say, we haven't got the luxury of a pause button. We can't stop the business, change the business, and then hit play again. And I say it's a bit like changing a wheel on the car. Everyone can change a wheel on the car. We get the spare tire out, we change the wheel, happy days. But the business still has to go, still has to. It's like changing a wheel on a car whilst the car is moving. And I use that.
I don't think that's actually a very good example of analogy. I can honestly say, if I was stuck somewhere, I would not be changing the wheel of a car. I don't know about the other girls on the call, but that's just that would be a good example of a bad analogy.
Well, just the whole concept of changing a tire on a wheel while the car is moving.
Well, yeah, that's hideous.
And I think when we're managing change in organisations, you know, it would be lovely to have a pause button, you know, to stop the organisation trading, doing stuff, serving customers. It would be nice if we could hit pause, rearrange things, make things suitable for the future, and then hit play again. And I think often we have to make change happen whilst things are moving, and that's the challenge. I think is changing the wheel on the car whilst the car is moving. It's like improving the organisation and making changes whilst the organisation is still trading, still serving its customers, still doing what it does. You know?
Di's just popped a question on there. Di's just said, by the way, there is actually an advert on the telly of a lady changing a wheel with the moving car. So obviously there's something in it then, Ian.
There is. I'll research that later. Thank you, Di. And then really important to use their language. I think one of the key things in part of my preparation, if I'm going into a company, is I say to them, do you have objectives? Or do you have targets? Or do you have goals? Or do you have key performance indicators? Or do you have critical success factors? Because it's really important for me when I'm working to use their language. And if I've got a room full of people with targets and I'm talking about objectives, it's not their job to translate what I'm saying. It's my job to understand what language they use. It's my job to ask the question early on and say, do you have objectives or targets? And they say, oh yeah, we have targets. I say, all right, that's the word I'm going to use. Because if I use the word objectives, I'm asking them to translate every time I use that word. So really important to think about the person or people that I'm communicating with, and to think about the language that I'm using. And the language is really important. There's been loads of research. You know, this goes back to the 1970s sometimes, when we talked about powerful words in the English language. There was a great book called Words That Work, which was by an American pollster who was thinking at the beginning of the 21st century. In 2000, he published a book, and he had 21 words and phrases for the 21st century. So I've taken some from that and some from other research, and just an idea here of some of the powerful words that are useful when we're communicating. So you, and talking about the effect it's going to have on somebody else, and putting the focus on them, obviously, is a very powerful word. Money is always there, especially saving money, saving time. Save is a very powerful word. Results, a lot of people results focused, so what's this going to do? How's it going to work? People like things to be new, you know, and fresh. They like life to be made easy for them. So if I'm implementing a new process or procedure, you know, I'm going to put a focus on, and this will make our life easy. Where we had to enter it 4 times onto 4 different fields on the system, now we can just enter it once and it populates 4 fields. You know, it's going to make your life easy. And I've put please and thank you on the list because I think to communicate clearly, we just need to have the right level of manners and use please and thank you more often. And then on the right-hand side, proven. People like proven things. They like things that are new, but they do like them to be proven. They want to be near the leading edge, but not on the leading edge. So proven, and when we've worked on this, and you know, we're not using it to test, it's actually proven. Guaranteed is the word that is quite powerful. Hassle-free. People just like life to be easy. Innovation, we want innovative ways of doing things. Efficient, and peace of mind. Peace of mind, just people need to know that they're in safe hands. So they're the sorts of powerful words that we might choose from, but I thought we could just ask people, to type in, what are the powerful words in your organisation, where you work, or maybe some of the clients you work with, if that's the way you work. What are the powerful words and phrases that you see when you're, or you hear, or you see written in documents in your organisation?
So if you could go to your questions box, and just, thanks Di's put some ones in already. If you could just give us some of those answers that you think are appropriate, as Ian says, to your organisation or your client's organisation. I mean, Ian said we do a lot of work with civil service, and I mean, it's not particular words, but obviously they love an acronym, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And we need to speak their language. It's not their job to translate what we say, and it's not our job to keep asking them what the acronyms mean. We have to learn them. We have to learn them and speak their language and make sure that we become fluent in the language of the organisations that we're working.
Yeah.
We have to do it. Otherwise it makes it difficult for them, and our job is to make it easy for them.
Yeah. Guys, because we've got just a couple of responses. Maybe we can just get a few more responses up, please. Oh, Lisa, that's lovely. Got a nice long one from you there. Thanks very much. I mean, Jack, I know, works in a media organisation. So maybe what are the specific ones that work in media or different sectors? It would be interesting to hear from there. And Katika, I'm not sure which sector in which you work, but obviously those sort of things, the sector in which you work can make a big difference. So we've got win-win, somebody said. We've got empowering, autonomy, well-being. Interesting. Lisa, I wonder what, Lisa, it would be great to know what sector you're actually working in. Resilience, self-expression, independence. We've got inclusion, and that's from somebody who's in the charity sector. We've got value for money, realistic, and someone says effective is more important than efficient. So those are some of the responses that we've had, Ian.
Excellent, excellent. And I think if I'm talking to a company for the first time, often I just go to their website and just see what words and phrases are used on their website, and often that's useful for me just to get a handle for their language. I worked with a company yesterday where on the website they talked about intelligence, ideas, heritage, specialism and strength. They were sort of like the 5 values, the 5 ways that they'd structured their website, and it seemed to be the way that they'd structured the company. So of course when I was working I was aiming towards those 5 things and blending it into what I was talking about. So I think we can do some research sometimes, or we can just think about the individual, you know. Is the individual the person, the sort of person where I'm going to have a conversation with them and they're analytical, thinking people, and they're more likely to say, I think this is a good idea? Or are they feeling people who are more likely to say, well, I feel this is a good idea? So I might have a preference for feeling. In my everyday language, I tend to use feel rather than think. But if I'm just about to have a conversation with somebody who I know is a very thoughtful, thinking person, analytical, working with data, I'm going to take data, I'm going to use the word think rather than using the word feel. So we just need to check about the language that we use. Number 8 I put down about checking for understanding. And I think when we are communicating, when we're busy, either face-to-face conversation or a presentation, or indeed in a telephone call and things like that, we need to check for understanding. And we need to stop regularly to ask if there are any comments, questions or observations. And when I am presenting or training, and even when I'm talking to people face-to-face, I do stop and say, you know, have you got any comments or questions or observations? And I think sometimes people stop and say, have you got any questions? And I think if you just say, have you got any questions, it's like opening the door a little bit, because people may have a question. But in my experience, I think people are more likely to have comments or observations. They're not questions. And if you just say, have you got any questions, the answer is no. They haven't got any questions, and therefore they don't contribute or participate or engage with you. If you actually say, have you got any comments or questions, often they've got a comment to make, and you've opened the door wider. And then you may want to say, or observations, and that opens the door right up. So by saying, have you got any comments, questions or observations, rather than just saying, have you got any questions, I think it opens the door farther. It gives you more opportunity to engage that person, and you get some rich data, which is often comments and observations. It's just that they don't have a question mark at the end.
I think, Ian, I particularly, when I'm delivering training on recruitment and selection, I always say that to people who are going to be doing the interview. Don't say in a rather hurried way at the end, you've got any questions? You know, as if to say, right, that's it, come on, my time's done, I've interrogated you as much as I've done my bit. It's definitely, or even just changing the, you know, what questions have you got for me? Makes it a more,
well, yeah,
it just makes it a bit warmer and gives that person the time and space to ask that question.
And I think that's important as an interviewer, that you do give that person the opportunity. And when I'm interested, I work with people on both sides of the table. You know, like Alyson, I often train people to recruit, but I also do some career transition work. So sometimes I'm helping people prepare for interview, and I encourage them to have questions ready. You know, sometimes I'm impressed when I'm recruiting. I'm impressed with a candidate because of the quality of the question they ask.
Yes.
But given it some thoughts, and it was a good question to ask at the end. And sometimes if I've got 2 candidates who look on paper as if they could both do the job, but one asks some really insightful questions at the end, I've got a warmer feeling about that candidate because they asked better questions at the end.
Yeah, and same goes for an appraisal. You know, at the end, again, you know, it can be a bit of a talking shop. I know appraisals can go on and on and on. The same for a performance review. You know, if you've had a performance improvement meeting with someone, again, so I'm thinking as a manager, just closing down all of these kind of one-to-one conversations that you have with your team, allowing them just that extra time. It may be that they just don't have anything, but at least I think if you ask them in that way, that gives them that that opportunity. I think that's a really good habit to get into.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then two things which may be stated the obvious. First is to look out for those non-verbal clues.
Yeah.
So if you're having a face-to-face conversation with them, picking up all the signals from facial expression or body language, and then asking clear questions. Sometimes it's a good idea to prepare the questions that you're going to ask, because you can then take out the unnecessary words and make them as clear as possible. Short, sharp, clear questions. That's the best way of getting contribution when you're communicating. A couple more things then. So number 9 is about summarising. Remember on that horizontal plan, on the right-hand column, I said that we should summarise, and there is this theory about primacy and recency. We remember first thing, so it's great to get off to a good start. A, B, C, D, and if appropriate, QHD. Let's get off to a great start. First impressions are really important. But last impressions are important too. People remember the last thing. So it's always good to have a great finish to any conversation or any presentation. And we need sort of one last point that's concise and memorable. So when you travel to work, maybe there's some music on the radio, and when you get to your job, you find yourself whistling that song, the last song you heard, you find whistling all day long. And sometimes, you know, you can't get it out of your head. To quote Kylie Minogue, whoever thought that I would quote Kylie Minogue?
I'm just thinking, I was in the car this morning and I heard that McDonald's, do-do-do-do-do, and that's going to be going around in my head all day.
Yeah, and that's just proof, you see. I like to quote Kylie Minogue because she quotes me all the time. So
Yeah,
it's nice.
I'm sure you're right on her radar.
So that last point that you whistle in your head, you know, it's the same with a conversation or a presentation. So you need to take control, and you need to make sure that you have the last word. Because I've seen people, you know, if you have a conversation with somebody, it's a very positive conversation about how this new process is going to help and work, and it's going to be great for the future. You ask them if they got any comments or questions, then they say, well, I'm not sure that we'll have time to do it. If that's the last thing they can remember of the conversation, it just reinforces that. What we have to make sure is that we have the last word, and we say, well, I can understand your concerns about timing, but the potential of this new process is to make our life a lot easier, and I'm sure that we can work together and adopt this process as quickly as possible to reap all the benefits. Always have the last word, the last positive word, maybe that short, sharp sound bite at the end, so that you control what people are whistling as they leave the conversation. And then number 10, I'm a learning professional. I would say this, wouldn't I? We need to learn from others, you know. So going forward from today, it would be great that, you know, when you receive a communication, when someone talks to you, or you go to a presentation, or even when you receive an email and you read it, or maybe a conversation that you have with somebody else, or a presentation that you attend, whenever communication happens, I'd like you to think, oh, that's interesting. Have I digested that content easily? Have I been able to fully understand the message quite easily? And if that is the case, look at the process. Well, what have they done? Did they give me an overview first and then gave me a really structured conversation or presentation about what they needed to be done? Were they crystal clear about the next steps? Did they leave me with one last point? I just want you to learn from excellence around you. So we all must learn from others, and I try and soak up and learn. I work with other trainers quite often, and, you know, I'm learning all the time just by the different ways that they cover material, the different words and phrases they use, the processes they adopt. So I just want to encourage you to learn from others. So that's it. Let's just fill out the top 10 tips. I just want to finish with the what next. We would do some action planning if we were all in the same room.
Yeah.
But there's an opportunity for you to type in now so we can see it. As a result of those top 10 tips about communicating for busy people, about conversations and presentations, about structure, about word choice, about all sorts of different things, what will you do differently?
Right, I'm also going to invite a couple of people to chat So
Okay.
I'm gonna. So while other people can please type in some of the things that they're going to do, we want at least one thing from everybody. We're clear about that, aren't we?
Oh yes.
Brilliant. So Di, I wonder what one thing might you do as a result of this webinar? Hello, Di.
She's run away.
Oh no. Okay. Let's see. Jack, are you there? Jack?
Yep, I'm still here.
Brilliant. How you doing, Jack?
I'm not too bad, thanks.
Good. Can you think of something?
Thank you for all the information.
Can you think of something you're going to do?
Well, I think personally for me, the prioritization of content is something that really stood out. I seem to sometimes when I'm trying to convey something to somebody else, maybe the point can sometimes get a little bit lost amongst everything else that I'm talking about. So I think that that's quite good. But also learning from others is pretty important to me at the moment. I'm part of a mentoring scheme with one of my senior managers here, and just seeing how he approaches certain situations and things like that, it's really been beneficial for me, and I've started to pay a lot more attention to processes that other people are using in their approach to things that I also do.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jack. That's brilliant. Okay, I'm going to open the floor and ask Katie. Katie, what's one thing that you think you would potentially do differently as a result of the call?
Just take a bit more time before providing any feedback, or if there's something that's a slightly more sensitive issue, I suppose just collecting my thoughts and making sure that the way that I approach the subject is a little bit more prepared for than if it were just an everyday inquiry, I suppose.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Excellent.
I'm going to just choose one more person. Gitika. I'm not sure whether your sound works. Hi, Gitika.
I did message saying I've got a really bad throat, so
Oh.
I typed it. However, I think the horizontal plan is a really good thing, because often I find that when we're short of time, another thing comes up and things have to be cut short at the last minute, that really makes me nervous, because I'm like, what do I say, what do I leave out? In my head everything is important. So I think the horizontal plan for me is a very useful tool, and I'm going to embed that in my style of communication, not only for presentations but even for one-to-one conversations. And this is something I really need to say, this is something I could say, and this is something I could leave out if I'm short of time. So I think that's something I'm really going to start using as a result of this webinar.
Good. Sorry, yeah, I do see it now that you did say I've got a bad throat, but I hadn't read that at the time. So
that's fine. As long as you guys could understand what I'm trying to say.
Well, listen, thank you very much, and I hope you don't feel too picked on, all of you. I just, we said at the top of the call that I think having the interaction and people speaking is really important. I think maybe when we run future events, I might even, as part of our registration, or it's worth us probably emailing people and saying, look, if you can, have your microphones ready. But anyway, some of the other things that people have said, Ian, is using your horizontal plan. They are going to try to implement as soon as possible to keep it fresh, i.e. the tip about controlling the tune people are whistling. Okay, that's lovely. All right, someone else said the horizontal plan. Oh, and Di was there. She hadn't gone to make a cup of tea. She said the sound cut out, but she's going to focus more on avoiding proprietary jargon and ending on a pertinent high. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we didn't talk about it in any detail at all today, but I also think that in your communication, we talked about tone of email communication, and I should listen. That should be my learning. Something I'm constantly working on, and need more improvement on the tone of my email versus my personal tone in my verbal communication. but also when I'm saying the tone and when you're actually speaking to people, making your voice interesting up and down, and getting that just keeping this sort of energy in that correspondence going. Somebody has said, I'll definitely be interested in tailoring my choice of words when I speak to a potential candidate in my team. There are some great examples of powerful words, and I really like asking people if they've ever got any more comments and observations, not questions, as you're bound to get feedback from your team with just a simple observation. Absolutely. And I just think there's one more reply. If you just bear with me, I'm going to another thing. Oh, good. So Connie's going to steal the plan on a page, and she's going to share it with others. Well, that's fine, Connie. We're very happy. Ian doesn't mind having things stolen and reutilised. We will put this up on Katie, who works with me, is terribly efficient and manages to get this up, and we will email you all a link so that you can. Obviously, you'd love to hear us all again, all 50 minutes of it. But I know you won't want to listen to it again, but you could share the link with others in your organisation. We're very happy for that to happen. So just one more comment from Rosie, Ian, then I'll hand back to you. Oh, she's going to go. She says she's had a great time. So back to you, Ian.
Superb. Just to finish off then, as well as thinking about what you're going to do, whenever I'm training, I always ask people, when we're action planning, yes, what are you going to do? But another really important question is, what support will you need to be able to do what you want to do? So I don't want you to type that in, but whenever we're doing action planning, we tend to finish off by saying, so what are you going to do? What support do you need in order to make that happen? So I just wanted you to give it some thought as to what support you might need from those around you in order to do what you want to do. And then finally, just to thank you for tuning in. Alyson and I and People Vision, we're running a lot of these webinars now, so we're doing it on a range of different subjects. So if you're interested in webinars either in-house in your organisation, and we do it for a few organisations, and it's a very cost-effective way of training people because they don't have to travel. A couple of the countrywide companies that we work with find that using webinars is a very cost-effective way of training their people. So they can use people in Scotland and in Cornwall, and they can train them at the same time through the medium of a webinar. If you'd like to talk about that, please do get in touch. Alyson's email address is there on the screen. But apart from that, have a great day. Thank you for your time this morning. And
I've actually popped a poll up there. I popped a poll up there, Ian, which is I like webinars because we're just interested to hear feedback from everyone. So, I've got a couple of options there. I can sit at my desk and learn, no need to travel. Maybe I like to use technology to learn. Thank you today. I don't think webinars, it'd be interesting to know, some people may never have been on a webinar before. So I wonder, there is a sort of slight distinction between a webinar and virtual classroom, virtual learning. We are going to be moving hopefully towards even more interaction, slightly different tweak on this where we get more personalisation with it as well. But some of you may think webinars would work really well in your organisation, and let's close that poll and share. So this is what everybody likes to sit on their bum in their home or at their office, and no need to travel. Yeah, I think that's absolutely perfect. And like Ian said, if you've got people all over the UK or the world, it can be really, really helpful. Well, listen, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to have you all on the call today. Thanks for your lovely feedback comments that are just coming in today. Ian will get us that link for the book. Connie has also been in and given me the name of a book, The Power of Introverts. I will include that in our email, the link. So that's 3 things we'll include. And no more from me. Anything else from you, Ian?
No, not at all. Just wish everyone a great day, and thank you for tuning in.
Brilliant. What a powerful ending, Ian. Okay, great. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There we go. And then there
There
were
we
two.
go. So how was that?